Poverty is not just the absence of money, but the absence of opportunity. And the United States is a country where you have both freedom and abundant opportunities. And moving to the United States has given me both. I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. I came from a close-knit family. I was the third of four children. And the best thing that my parents gave me was the gift of education. Even though I came from a poor family, they gave me education with the instruction that this is the tool that will help me to dig my way out of poverty and ignorance. But what my parents did was that they instilled in us the value of faith, hard work, and not giving up. They made us realize that if you put in the work, you will definitely get the reward. I came without a dime in my pocket. All I had was big dreams, determination to succeed, and the resilience. I got my first job at the age of 14. My job was on a construction site. My duties were to move concrete on a large pan from one end of the construction site to another one. I worked on that day from around 6 in the morning to about 7 at night. At the end of the day, the employer refused to pay me. And the reason was because she did not authorize the foreman to hire me. So I worked from sunup to sundown and didn't get paid. That tore up my spirit. And from that moment on, I decided that I was going to become a lawyer. And I was going to use every ounce of strength within me to fight against injustice, regardless of how powerful the opponent is. I am a man that worked my way up from nothing. I know what it means to feel like you're being unfairly treated, and I'm the person that can stand up to opponents regardless of how big or how powerful they are. Welcome to this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel Olawale. My guest today is a candidate for Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. He's been an attorney for multiple decades, and he's been working as a prosecutor in one capacity or the other for over 20 years. His name is Anthony Pierson. Welcome to the show,
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
and thank you for coming. Can you introduce yourself to the audience? I know I have tried to give you a brief intro, but they need to hear from you. Who is Anthony Pierson?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, again, I want to thank you for having me on your show. Um, my wife went to law school with you, as you know. I think you guys were maybe in the same study group way back
Yes.
when, and spoke highly of you. And that's great that you've done all the things that you have done and great success. So, I congratulate you for that. But
Thank you.
I'm originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. My mother was a beautician. My father worked at the local power and light company in Indianapolis. I grew up, I had a half sister and a brother, and lots of large family that I was really close with. I grew up there, spent my whole life there. I ran track in high school. And after high school, I was good enough to run under scholarship for Ball State University, which is a northern liberal arts college located in Indiana. After that, I went on to go to law school at the Ohio State University College of Law, and I enjoyed my time there. Graduated from Ohio State in law, and I stayed. I got a job at Schottenstein, Zox and Dunn, which is now Ice Miller Law Firm, and I just started working there. I was in the litigation department and the public law department. And part of the public law department, we represented municipalities. And one of the municipalities that we represented was the city of Dublin. And so, being a new associate, I got a chance to represent the city of Dublin and prosecute minor misdemeanors and misdemeanors in their traffic court and mayor's court over there. And so that was my first foray into active trial court litigation and criminal law. And it was fascinating. I loved it. I fell in love with it. And as a result, I decided to do that full time on a higher level, and went to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, which at that time was being run by Ron O'Brien. He was the elected official, and I prosecuted felony crimes. So, um, you asked who was Anthony Pierson. I have a wife, a beautiful wife, as I stated, Krista. She is a lawyer as well. We have four beautiful children of varying ages: 23, 18, 16, and 12. And they just keep us busy. So it's a good, busy household that we have.
I'm sure it is, especially running a campaign and having to bring your family along. I know you grew up in a family where I believe there was support. Your mom worked as a beautician, and your father worked for the light company. So what inspired you to go into another direction, law?
Yeah, well, that didn't happen immediately. Growing up, I think my parents would say that I argued a lot. I remember having a lot of spirited arguments with my aunt, uh, wi- over a lot of things. We
Mhm.
would argue and have discussions and debates over religion, um, schooling issues, homework. I mean, it was. I think I was just constantly arguing, so it was a natural fit for me. But how I got into criminal law was I was about 10 years old, and I remember being at home, and I remember my mother coming through the door. She came through the garage door into the house, and I think I was in the living room maybe. And my father was in the kitchen, and she comes in and she goes immediately to my father, which was kind of odd because she would usually greet us, me and my brother, but she bypassed us and went straight to my dad. And I overheard her conversation that she was having with him, and it turned out she had been robbed. And she was a beautician, as I stated, leaving home from work. It was just a regular week. I think it was a weekday night in the summertime, and it was dark outside, and she was coming home, and a guy stuck a gun in her face as she was out about to pump her gas, and took her wallet, yanked her purse off of her shoulder, and ran. The guy was never caught. He was never prosecuted. But what stood out in my mind was my parents' frustration about not being able to catch this guy and hold him accountable. Now, my father was he was really athletic. He was really strong. He was taller than I was. He was a superhero to me. But even at that time, he was so frustrated, and my mom was crying, and it was just a really troubling time for me as you can imagine, being a 10-year-old kid, looking and seeing my parents be hurt in this way, just emotionally, by being a victim of a violent crime. Even though she wasn't shot or anything, it's still a violent crime. And they lived with that, and I lived with that. So growing up, I just wanted to hold people accountable for the wrong things that they did. And so going through undergrad and even law school, I wasn't sure if I was going to maybe go into law enforcement, which I thought was okay, but part of it really didn't fit me entirely, because I had some other things that I'll talk about that it just didn't feel right for me to be a cop or to go in the FBI or anything like that. So um, I decided, as I went through law school and started working and prosecuting misdemeanors, I thought, wow, this is me right here. This is what my calling is.
Oh, thank you. So that traumatic experience that that you experienced through your mom, but that your mom experienced firsthand, really puts you into thinking about law enforcement. And I understand that happened at the age of 10. And while you went through high school, through college, did you have that determination that I am going to go to law school no matter what? Or did you have some kind of plan B?
No, to be honest with you, Emmanuel, I didn't. I didn't have any thoughts about law school until I was actually in undergrad. Um, my first major was criminal justice, and then I switched to economics, and I ended up graduating with a law degree in economics. Math came easy-ish to me. I don't know that it comes easy to anybody, but it was easier than most to me. So I kind of latched onto it. I was fortunate enough to have some very good professors. And in law school, I took a class, not in law school, in undergrad, I took a class. It was a debate-oriented class, and I remember debating with other students about the death penalty. Some of us were for it and some of us were against it, and we were set to debate, and we had a debate. And the professor afterward said, you should go to law school. You shouldn't waste your time getting your PhD in economics, which was my other option, the other pathway that I was thinking about. He said, you shouldn't do that. It's just a bunch of math. You're really good thinking on your feet. You speak very well. You should go to law school. And as a result of his encouragement, I ended up going to law school, and it was a great decision. I'm glad I
Wow.
didn't get a PhD in economics and be in an
Wow.
office all day.
There's nothing like having a good counselor or mentor to steer you to your purpose. Did you
Exactly.
ever told your mom the connection between the robbery and your eventual choice to become an attorney and prosecutor?
Yes, we talked later in life. My mom passed away back in 2010, and so when I had been working at the prosecutor's office for a while, I first started working at the Franklin County prosecutor's office back in 2005. And when I went from the big law firm life to the county life, my pay decreased by about 50%. My first job at the county prosecutor's office, I was making $42,000 as an attorney, someone with a law license. I was making $42,000. But I loved it. And there's nothing like loving what you do. And so we would have those conversations, and I would kind of talk about why I did the things that I did. I would talk about the importance of holding people accountable. And I would talk about how I remembered when she was, hey, remember that guy robbed you? He wasn't held accountable. I want to make sure that other people, other victims out there who are victimized by someone and we happen to catch them, or that law enforcement happens to catch them, that they serve the time that they deserve. They get what they have earned.
Thank you. No, and as I mentioned before, your father works for a local light company, power and light company.
Yeah.
How did his work ethics influence you in your
Oh,
choice of career and in your work as a prosecutor?
yeah. I think about that every day, just about every day. When my alarm goes off at about 5:15 every morning, I think about, because I'm tired. I don't feel like getting up. But I remember my father, and because he worked at the IPL, which is what the company was called, Indianapolis Power and Light Company. He worked what is called a swing shift. So sometimes he'd work from 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the evening. He'd do that for like 2 weeks, and then he would have another shift from 4 o'clock to midnight, or he would work a shift from midnight to 8 in the morning. He was called I think they called it a swing shift supervisor. So he never worked the same hours. And I remember sometimes, when I got a little older, or on the weekends or something like that, I would have to wake him up at like 10 o'clock at night. I'd have to wake him up at 10 o'clock at night for him to get ready, take a shower, put on his clothes, and get to the power station by 11 so that he could start his actual job at midnight. And so I just remember, wow, I could not imagine getting up at 10 o'clock at night and going into work. And he would work on holidays as well, because on holidays he'd get like time and a half, so he'd get extra money. Family, a growing family, certainly he's going to do whatever he needed to do to earn extra income for his family, for his wife and kids. And he did it. And I never heard or saw him complain about having that job and getting up and going to work. I mean, he complained when he was discriminated against and they passed him over for the umpteenth time for a permanent supervisor position. He complained about that, but he didn't complain about the job, about having to get up whenever he needed to. And I I don't know how he did it. So whenever I get up and it's 5:15 and I feel like complaining, I kind of snap myself and go, no, you're not going to be a baby. You're going to get up and you're going to do it. So yeah, I mean, I think about it multiple times a week.
Wow. So it taught you the importance of hard work.
Yes. Yeah. And as you know, there's no substitute for that.
No substitute for it. Yeah, can you also tell us the importance of a personal connection and empathy in your line of work, especially from the fact that you also learned from your mother's profession as a beautician?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. Um, I, I've seen a lot of different, I guess, views from the criminal justice system. You know, I've been a prosecutor in some way, shape, or form, essentially since 2003. But again, drawing on my past, when I was about 13 years old, me and my cousin, he was my favorite cousin. We were like best friends. I was 6 months older than him. His birthday was May 19th, and my birthday is December 30th. So we were very close. We were like best friends. We did everything together. And I remember we went to go play basketball at his apartment complex where he lived at his mom's. We were coming back. This was like a Saturday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. And we're coming back, and a police car pulls up really fast right behind us. I think it's going to hit us. And we move out of the way. The officers slam on the brakes. They jump out of the car. They tell us to come here. We walk over to them. They push us on the police car and they frisk us for weapons. They frisk us all up and down and things like that, just like you would see on the movies. And obviously they didn't find anything on us. And after that, they say, we were looking for someone who committed a burglary, and we thought you were the guys. So then they get in their cars and they leave. And we're looking at each other like, what the what? We've got on t-shirts, shorts, and a basketball. Like, what did you think we stole from this house? So I think I think about that when I look at and evaluate cases. No one's perfect. Their prosecutors aren't perfect. Police officers aren't perfect. So I want to make sure that I'm giving cases that come to us a fresh look, because I don't want to just, my goal is not to just put people in prison and convict anyone I can, or as many people as I can. My goal is to hold the people who commit the crimes accountable for the crimes they commit. So in my job, I think it's very important to bring a level of empathy. One of the things I want to do when I become county prosecutor is make sure my administration prosecutes the crime, not the person, because some people just have a lapse in judgment for that moment in time, and they commit a crime or they do something that is illegal. Yeah, they should be held accountable for it. But in a lot of crimes, we shouldn't be punishing people for their entire lives for something that doesn't deserve it. I mean, there are some crimes that do, but not all crimes do, and we should be cognizant of that. That people, I like to say that most people are not criminals; they have committed a crime, and we should look at it in that way, and not hold it against them for their entire life.
Thank you. You talked about holding people equally accountable, and also you told a story about how law enforcement, harassed you and your young cousin.
Yeah.
How do you plan as a prosecutor to also hold law enforcement accountable, especially in situations involving police misconduct?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, Emmanuel, I had been doing that when I worked for the Attorney General's office. So I had worked for the county prosecutor's office for a period of time, and I went over to the Ohio Attorney General's office. And initially, I had one assignment. I was prosecuting the Pike County massacre that happened in Pike County, but that prosecutor, the lead prosecutor, I was the second prosecutor. The lead prosecutor left the Attorney General's office and essentially took that case with her and prosecuted it with the local prosecutor down there. So I was since that was my main case and now that case was gone, I was looking for essentially a different outlet to apply myself. And the Attorney General's office had a lot of cases from other jurisdictions where officers had used deadly force. And the Attorney General needed prosecutors and a special prosecutor to look at those cases objectively, take those cases to the grand jury, and if the grand jury felt that that officer was incorrect in their use of force and broke the law, I would prosecute that case. So I have had the opportunity to go all across the state of Ohio, basically, and prosecute cases involving law enforcement. I've prosecuted cases in Cleveland, Akron, Scioto County. I had a case where a corrections officer killed an inmate. I tried that corrections officer for murder. There are cases in Guernsey County and other counties where I have been a special prosecutor and held law enforcement to the correct standard and brought them to the law. Sometimes the grand jury felt that they acted within the bounds of the law, and that was fine. Sometimes the grand jury felt that those officers had committed crimes, and that's fine too. So as a prosecutor in Franklin County, I certainly don't want to give law enforcement a pass. I think law enforcement should be partners with the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. We should work with them. Most law enforcement officers are good people. They help people out, but some of them unfortunately use bad judgment and break the law, and they should be prosecuted as well. Just like if I did it, just like if you've done it.
Thank you. So, how do you plan to balance this partnership or cooperation with law enforcement and accountability?
Yeah. I think a lot of law enforcement officers agree that bad law enforcement officers or officers who break the law via terrible judgment should be held accountable. So I would just like to, I want to continue to have an open dialogue with law enforcement. And again, what I've done in other jurisdictions is that I have open dialogue with them. I'm honest with them. They know where I stand. I'm not trying to hide the ball. They know I'm not trying to be sneaky. They're not, no, I'm not trying to prosecute someone for political gain. And I think that's where the breakdown is. You'll have some prosecutors prosecuting, whether it's police officers or whether it's other vulnerable populations in the community, they want to prosecute those people just for political gain. I'm not a politician. I know I have to get enough votes to win an election, but at heart, I'm not a politician. I'm a prosecutor. I've been a felony prosecutor for about 20 years now. So that's how I plan to balance it. And I think I will have the support of law enforcement as well as the community.
Thank you. And before you came to Franklin County, you also worked as a prosecutor for the city of Dublin for 5 years. Can you tell us about some of the cases you handled while a prosecutor in Dublin?
Yeah, I was a prosecutor for the city of Dublin for it was about I think it was about 2 years. Again, when I worked for Schottenstein, Zox and Dunn, we were the legal counsel, and most of those cases were misdemeanors. Well, actually, all of them were misdemeanors because it was in their mayor's court. So it's mainly traffic offenses, but it was a good way for me to cut my teeth, so to speak. It was a good way for me to learn. Um, excuse me. It was a good way for me to learn. I would go into court. A lot of times, the mayor's court started at I think maybe 6 o'clock, maybe 5 or 6 o'clock. I would talk to various people who most of the time were representing themselves for a traffic violation, and the ones who disputed it, they would have to come back or stay until about 8 o'clock, and we would start trials. The trial would be tried in front of the mayor. I'd put on evidence. I'd usually put on one or two witnesses, usually the officer who pulled the person over and maybe someone else who may have witnessed the traffic violation. So it was very interesting, especially as a new young prosecutor. I had thoughts of doing great things in law school. But then I went to a firm and it wasn't exactly my cup of tea, not what I felt that I signed up for. And then all of a sudden I'm in a courtroom and I'm calling witnesses and I'm doing objections. I'm like, wow, this is it. This is the real thing. This is it. And I loved it. I loved it.
Wow. And what was it like for you, the transition for you to move from a small town prosecutor to a major city or
Yeah.
metropolitan county prosecutor? What was it like?
It was great. It was again really eye opening because when I went from the city prosecuting cases for the city of Dublin, I think we did that one day a week. And then when I went over to the Franklin County prosecutor's office, it was obviously every day. That was all I did. Um, it was very interesting. I started off in the juvenile unit, which is the general transition for a new hire at the county prosecutor's office. You start off in the juvenile unit, then go to the grand jury unit, and then go to adult trial staff where you're handling adult felonies, and then maybe to a specialty unit like the special victims unit, the gun unit, the what other unit, the OVI unit, the arson unit. So we have various units there. But anywho, it was great. I started off again prosecuting juvenile crimes, and most of them were felonies. And I got to see some very serious stuff very quickly. There were even though I was in the juvenile unit, there were rapes that I prosecuted, there were murders that I prosecuted, drug offenses, lots of fights in schools, and you got to see the real uh, things that the normal person doesn't see, isn't aware of in the community. But there's a lot of violence out there, and what I tell people is it's really sad to see the harm that humans do to other humans. It's really sad, and sometimes it's hard to watch, but it's out there. And it made me really decide or confirm that my decision was correct, that I needed to be on the front lines of this to use my expertise to help people who are in need and people who have become victims, and to make sure that people who victimize others are held responsible. And even if they were juveniles, they needed to be held accountable, because you know what, if they're not held accountable now for the assault that they do or the shooting that they do as a 16-year-old or 15-year-old, there sure aren't gonna feel like there should be any consequences whether they're an adult, a 20-year-old or 25-year-old, causing havoc in the community.
Thank you. And you mentioned that you are in the front line of some of these crimes.
Yes.
You also have to be, you have a front seat to major horrors and depravity and just bad things. How do you cope mentally seeing this day in, day out, year in, year out? How do you cope mentally?
It's a challenge, and it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. There are some people who don't want to know about all of the bad things that humans or that we do to each other as a people. And I I like to kind of separate it a bit from my personal life. I like to set it aside and leave work at work and not let it creep into my everyday. But sometimes it's really impossible. I see cases where maybe a baby has been murdered or an innocent bystander has been killed, and they're just minding their own business. Good people, never committed a crime, and they don't have any criminal record, and then they're caught in a gang shootout or something, and that's really heartbreaking. That's really heartbreaking. But I like to put it back into my work. It reminds me of my responsibility as a prosecutor to hold people accountable who do the bad things, because I feel like if I don't do it, if my office doesn't do it, then who will? We can't all live in a world of rainbows and butterflies and pretend that this stuff doesn't happen, because it does. And someone has to be there to hold people accountable for the crimes that they commit, no matter how ugly those crimes are. And I feel that I have a gift that I can do that, and I certainly don't want to waste that, because I feel it's a responsibility at this point. to hold people accountable and to help the victims out in what is often the worst day of their life.
Hold people accountable and help victims. You also worked as the chief staff and chief legal counsel for the Ohio prison system.
Yeah.
What was that like? And did you push for any reform?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I was I was chief counsel for the Ohio Department of Youth Services, which is Ohio's juvenile prison system. And I was brought into the agency because the agency was under some class action lawsuits. And the director at that time wanted a prosecutor, someone who had courtroom trial experience that could get the agency on board with the reform that is needed, as well as defend the agency from the things that we were doing, because the agency was doing some good things. It just wasn't being recognized for it. So that was a challenging position, but I really liked it because it had a very good mission. And that mission for me, my job, was to make sure that the agency, that the juvenile prison system, was providing constitutional levels of care to these juveniles that we had in our custody. And not a lot, but some of the staff there were hesitant. Some of the staff there wanted to treat the juvenile offenders like adult offenders. They wanted to essentially provide a form of punishment within the correction setting, and that's not our legal responsibility. We are not supposed to do that. And so it took a lot of working with the federal courts, the federal court monitor, Judge Marbley, as well as individuals within the institution, to get them to understand that not only do we have to treat these juveniles better, not only do we have to do it because the court's telling us to do it, not only because it is the legal thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. And it makes their job as corrections officers better, easier. Because if you have a juvenile, whether it's a juvenile or an adult, if they're in prison and they feel like that they're being taken advantage of, that they're being treated like animals, often they lash out against correction staff. So you have staff that are injured on the job, and that's not productive. It's not helpful. It's not good for anybody. So it was really a good way for me to become familiar with corrections law, conditions of confinement. That was important to know, and also to negotiate with, again, the federal court monitors as well as the staff at the juvenile institution. And Emmanuel, working there provided me great insight, because that experience was able to give me a really a 360 look of the criminal justice system, right? Because before then I had just been sending people to prison, and after working in the Department of Youth Services, I got to see what happens after the prosecution's over. Their lives still go on. There's another chapter to the story after someone gets to prison. It is, hey, what is their conditions of confinement like? What type of programming are they getting so that they leave the institution better than when they came into the institution? Have we corrected their criminal thinking and their criminal mindset so we don't have a repeat offender once we let them out? So it was a really great experience and really educated me on really the criminal justice system holistically.
So you got to see the epilogue of what happens
Yeah.
after people get convicted.
Yes, absolutely.
And that reshaped your view about prosecuting cases and even the justice system.
Yeah. Can I tell you a story really quick?
Sure.
Yeah. So my first day at DYS, Ohio's juvenile prison system, what they did is they took me to the various institutions, so I could see what it was like. I had been in an adult prison before, visiting family members who had been locked up, but I had never been in a juvenile corrections facility, certainly none in Ohio. So they take me around, and the first institution I go to was located near Massillon, Ohio. It's called the Indian River Facility. I'm pretty sure they don't call it correction institution, but it's about an hour and a half drive, right? So I get there, it's about 9 o'clock in the morning, I've got to go to the bathroom because I've had my coffee. I've gone an hour and a half. So I go there, I go through the front gate, I go into the building, and I go to the bathroom, and I hear someone come behind me into the bathroom. Okay, fine, whatever. So I finish using the bathroom, and I turn around, and face to face is a guy, a kid. I think he was 17. He may have turned 18, but I think he was 17. I recognized him, and it was a kid who I sent there. I had sent him to DYS. His nickname on the street was Murder. So that gives you a little bit of insight of his street, his street life. The crime that I sent him there for was attempted murder because he shot a guy 13 times. Okay. The guy lived. Fortunately, I don't know how, but the guy lived. So I'm standing face to face with a guy who I sent to prison. His name is Murder. We're in the bathroom. There's no corrections officers or anyone in sight. It's just him and me, he and I. And I'm thinking through my mind, oh, wow, my first day on the job, and I'm about to fight this kid in the bathroom. Is he going to like swing on me? Is he going to take me? Like, what's about to happen? And he says, do you remember me? I go, yeah. He goes, how are you, Mr. Pierson? And I go, huh, I'm pretty good. How are you? He says, I'm doing great. He goes on to tell me that he received his GED. He has the highest clearance level. He has earned the highest clearance level. So he works for the superintendent. So he can come and go as he pleases. His job is cleaning the front office, and he was there emptying trash cans and things like that, and just wanted to say hi to me and tell me how he was doing. So, I washed my hands. I shook his hand, and I was like, wow. And that stayed with me. Yeah, obviously it's with me today. That again, when I sent him to prison, I was like, this is a terrible kid. This is a terrible person. He should be in prison for a long time. But only a couple of years later, and this kid is talking about how he's got his GED and he's turned his life around. So I always think of that when, not always, but in a lot of my cases, I think about that and how you stated, it's the epilogue. It's like, what is going to happen after this chapter is closed, after the judge hits this gavel and the criminal prosecution process is over. And so it really was instrumental to me thinking, we need to prosecute the crime and not the individual, because a lot of the times the crime is separate than the individual. Yes, they should be held accountable, but we shouldn't hold them accountable or punish them for their entire life for something. Not always, sometimes, but not always.
Not always. And even before you became an attorney in 1998, you were given the award of the best Democratic intern at the Indiana State House.
Yeah.
How did that award and that experience, inspire you, or how did that affect your future political aspirations?
So I I had a good friend of mine. We were in college. We ran track together, and he was really political. Even though he hasn't run for any elected office, he's a president of a bank in Arizona right now. But in college, he found this program. It was an internship that we at Ball State could take, and it was an internship at the Indiana State House. So he told me he was going to apply, and I thought it was just a great opportunity to apply. It was basically a full-time job / internship at the Indiana State House. So I agreed to apply with him, and he was an intern for the Indiana House, or for a couple, I think 2 state reps, and I got the opportunity to be an intern for 2 state senators. And we would do intern things, addressing constituent issues, maybe writing parts of speeches and things like that. It was during my junior year in college. And it was just a great experience. I got to work for a senator, Senator Cleo Washington and Senator Gary. And it was just a great experience to see the political process at work. I have not really followed the political process, but this was a great eye opener for me to see how things got made, to see how the negotiations happened, to sit in committee hearings and things like that. And at the end of the year, or it was the semester, so at the end of the semester, when we were done, they always awarded a intern of the year, one Republican and one Democrat. And I've been a lifelong Democrat, and as a result, I interned for 2 Democrat state senators, and they awarded me Senate Democrat intern of the year. And it took me by surprise, but it let me know. That was like the first time that I was really reassured that I could hang with my peers when it came to really politics or education. I did not get great grades in high school. I was an athlete, and the only reason I got into college, I think, was because I had a good. I was good at track, and this was I was wowed by it and really humbled by it that I was selected intern of the year. There was only one, and I think there were probably about. I mean, there were interns from all over the state of Ohio. I'm sorry, the state of Indiana. All of the major colleges had interns there, and I was fortunate enough to win. I was really humbled and happy about it.
Thank you. You talked about running track in high school, but then you talked about not getting good grades. But then running track itself requires another level of discipline. How does that discipline affect you as a prosecutor? How did that translate
Yeah.
to your job as a prosecutor?
Yeah, that's great that you bring that up because it does. I being an athlete, especially running track, running is different than any other sport, in my opinion. In running, you're going to get tired. You're going to feel your body hurting. People who play basketball, you might get tired, but you're likely not going to hurt. Football, you might get hurt, you might get tired, but there may be some plays where you don't. If you're not tired and you're not hurting in running track, you're not doing it right. So I kind of have learned just through my life experience of running Division I college level track, I kind of accepted the fact that things are going to suck sometimes, but not the entire time. There is a finish to this. And once you hit the finish line, then you can rest, not before. And I've taken that to heart really in my campaigning and in my work. I know that preparing for a trial is hard. It's a lot of long hours. You know this. You've had trials. It's a lot of long hours, but there's going to be a payoff at the end. Even if the payoff isn't this particular case, it's the experience, it's the journey. I'm going to be better next time. And I've worked. I mean, that's part of my core. That's part of who I am.
Yeah, thank you. You also worked under former governor of Ohio, Ted Strickland.
Yeah.
Yes, working there, at least working for the governor, what insights did you gain about the intersection of politics and criminal justice?
Yeah. It was a great experience. It was when I was chief legal counsel for the Ohio Department of Youth Services. I originally applied to be one of his attorneys because the governor usually has 3 or 4 attorneys who do various things for him. And I applied to be one of his attorneys. I got beat out by another talented attorney who had a few more years of experience than I did. And so I did not get the job of being one of his attorneys. But when the position came up to be chief counsel for DYS, they remembered me and called me and hired me to be chief counsel for DYS. We intersected regularly with the governor's office because a lot of the things that we did were important to the governor, such as dealing with youth and incarceration. And so, I intersected with him and his team regularly. We would have regular meetings over at the governor's office to talk about various legal issues that the chief legal counsels were dealing with. So it was really good to see that intersection and also to see the various aspects of Governor Strickland and how he operated. I was also fortunate enough to be on his clemency work group, which is when he lost the election to Governor Kasich, he put together a work group really quickly and said, look, I want you to take a look at all these criminal files. If you can find a file where someone should be forgiven for the crime that they have committed, pull it, make a report about it, and then maybe that person will be forgiven essentially for the crime that they have committed. And so I spent, I don't remember how many, but a few days there just going through and reading files and making notes on files, giving my opinion as to whether someone should be forgiven for the crime that they had committed. And I thought that was, I was really impressed by that, because he didn't have to do that. He had lost the election. He could just say, see ya, I'm done, good luck. But he still looked out for people who he felt that he could help. And I was really impressed by that.
You worked for him to figure out clemency. It seems the journey of your life was always meant to lead to where you are right now. You started off with your mom experiencing the robbery, the trauma from that. You experienced discrimination or being profiled by the police yourself.
Right.
Then you worked as a prosecutor, prosecuting juveniles. Then you got to work at the prison system, seeing the epilogue of what happens after that. Then you got to work for a governor, dealing with clemency, how to forgive those who have been convicted. And now you're running for prosecutor. What eventually inspired you to let you know that you need to lead this division?
Yeah. So I never really thought that I'd run for any elected office. Being in the courtroom and being around a lot of judges, there are various attorneys and other people who would say that, hey, you should run for judge. You ever think about running for judge? And it was kind of in the back of my mind, but I really didn't have a strong desire to run for judge. And I didn't think that being a county prosecutor here in Franklin County was ever really an option, because Ron O'Brien was a long-standing prosecutor here in Franklin County. I mean, he had run, I think he was a prosecutor for about 24 years. And so that's a long time. And he showed no signs of slowing down. And I didn't think that he would ever lose an election until Gary Tyack decided to beat him and to run for election. And Gary Tyack beat him. So when Gary beat him, I looked at Franklin County as my home and said, is this a possibility? How long is Gary going to be the county prosecutor? Because Mr. Tyack is not a young individual. He makes it clear that he'll be 77, I think, by the time the new prosecutor takes office, and he has no plans to run. So he and I started having conversations, myself and persons from his office started having conversations about me coming over really soon after he won the election. But I was handling an officer-involved shooting case dealing with a Columbus police officer at the time. I'm still handling it. But it was over at the Attorney General's office through my work as a special prosecutor. And I didn't want to leave that case and abandon that family. So I decided that when this case is over, then I'll make my leap over to the county prosecutor's office. So that case is still going on, but I kept having conversations with the Franklin County prosecutor's office. I thought it was the right move for me, and especially since Mr. Tyack wanted someone to bring in to really succeed him. And so again, we had a lot of good conversations, and he felt that I was the right person for it. And when I reflected on my journey, my life journey, Emmanuel, I thought about the things that you're saying. I thought about my work and seeing all sides of the criminal justice system. And I said, wow, there's no other county prosecutor that I know of in the history of Franklin County, or any persons potentially running for the office, that has the level of 360 experience that I have, the level of extensive felony trial experience, and being chief counsel of a juvenile prison system, and being a victim firsthand through my mom, and being discriminated by the police, and having trials against police officers and corrections officers for wrongdoing, but also having trials and convicting people of murder, I was like, wow, I'm really built for this. This is what I was meant to do, and so I jumped full fledged into it.
Yes. You've seen all the different sides of the coin when it comes to criminal justice, the front, the back, and the middle.
Yes.
Yes. Is it fair to say that the current prosecutor, the current Franklin County prosecutor, has named you as his successor?
Yes, he has. He has.
Okay. And now, okay, he has put his confidence in you. Why do you think you are much more qualified or uniquely qualified for that spot,
Mhm.
especially since you have someone running against you in the primaries?
Yeah. Well, um, I started prosecuting cases, I stated, since I think in 2003. I started prosecuting cases. Started off with misdemeanors. I've been prosecuting felony cases since about 2005, and again, all levels. I don't. I'm not sure that there are many people in the county who have the level of experience that I have when it comes to prosecuting cases and working the different levels of the criminal justice system. I bring a level of experience that I don't see very much, and I have a passion for prosecuting cases and helping victims out, as well as holding people accountable. And any of my other potential opponents, they just don't have that. They don't bring it to the table. And one thing I would say with prosecuting cases and working in an industry like the law, you wouldn't want, for instance, if you're a doctor, or, I'm sorry, let me start over. For instance, if you were seeking medical care, you wouldn't want the lead doctor of your hospital to not have worked in your hospital or in your area, or practiced at the level that you need. You wouldn't want to go, if you're, again, have a case that needs handled, you wouldn't want the lead prosecutor to not know how to do it. And I definitely know how to do it. I've prosecuted, I've been on death penalty cases. I've given people, sent people to prison for life without parole. I have a level of experience that none of my other potential opponents have. And we're at a place in Franklin County now where we don't have time for a prosecutor to get up to speed on the various intricacies of the law. We don't have that luxury. All you have to do is turn on the TV and see the level of murders, the level of shootings. They're happening in broad daylight. They're happening in all corners of the county. So one of the things that I did when I went back over to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office under Gary Tyak's leadership, I wanted to get immersed in every different area that I could think of that exists, so that when I become the next county prosecutor, there is no learning curve really for me. It's just another day at the office that I am, right now I'm involved in new hiring, making sure we're hiring good candidates, good prosecutors, trying to get more prosecutors of color, because I think that's important. I'm also involved in training new staff. I've put in a program where we're training all those who have less than 10 years of being an attorney. I'm training them on how to try cases from voir dire all the way through closing arguments. I'm working with bridging the gap with other areas of prosecution. For instance, I'm working with the city attorney's office a lot more. I'm working with the federal prosecutor's office a lot more, just so we can have communication, we can have seamless prosecution, so that the people who are committing these crimes can be held accountable. I'm looking at our physical footprint in the office, meaning that if we need to hire 10, 15 more attorneys based on the level of crimes that have been being committed and the new offenses that we indict, that we have spaces for all of those attorneys. So I'm looking at what is our physical capacity in this building? Should we move buildings? Should we move part of our offices to a building? Should we offsite some of our file storage? So I'm trying to immerse myself in all of these different levels of the office so that, again, I can hit the ground running, because Franklin County, we're at a place where we can't have a 100-day or 150-day learning curve for someone to get up to speed with the various levels of felonies out there. So no disrespect to any of the other people who are thinking about running for the county prosecutor's office or who have entered the race. I think they're all good people. But this is too important of an office to be a stepping stone for someone for their political aspirations. I've been doing this job for about 20 years now, meaning prosecuting felons in Franklin County. So, for someone to have prosecuted cases in Franklin County, I'm like, what are you waiting on? The job is here. You could have been here. If this is what you wanted to do, you could have done this already. Which is what I have been doing, because I think it's important. And that's why I've been doing this and working at the prosecutor's office off and on, essentially, since 2005.
Yeah, you've been there since, and you've been at the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office for about 10 years. I understand the continuity if you were to be the next Franklin County Prosecutor, but what other positive changes do you plan to bring to the office if you were to succeed the current prosecutor?
Okay. So I have a list of things that I've been jotting down of ways where I can help take the county prosecutor's office to the next level. The most important thing, which I have started already, is training. We have a lot of new attorneys because, and that's for a couple of reasons. One is the transition from a Republican office, Ron O'Brien, to now a Democrat office under Gary Tyack. There was some transition there, and there were people who left the office. There were also, based on that transition, there were also people who left the office just because they retired. They had been working for a long time. They had put in their time and they retired. Then we were also hit with COVID. And as you know, COVID has wreaked havoc not only on our physical health, but also in industries. Lots of industries across the board are suffering from a personnel shortage. You look at the police officers, you look at retail stores, you look at restaurants. Basically, every industry is having trouble finding good quality workers. The prosecutor's office has not gone unaffected by that. We are still looking for new qualified prosecutors, qualified employees. So there was a lot of people who left. As a result, we have a lot of new attorneys. Those attorneys are good, hardworking Americans, but they just need to be trained more. Because during COVID, we had a period of time where courts were closed. There were no trials happening. There was no in-person interaction really happening. And so we had prosecutors who were not getting the proper training that this job requires. So my focus right now is getting those people up to speed. Again, they're good, eager, young prosecutors, but that's the most important thing that we need to solve. And I'm doing that right now because we have a lot of cases happening. There are a lot of shootings and there are a lot of murders that have happened that need to be tried, again, because of this COVID backlog. So that's on my front line of duties and responsibilities. And I'm solving that problem right now as we speak.
And what would you like the people of Franklin County to remember you for?
To remember me for, I would like the people of Franklin County to remember me for my passion for the work, my passion for helping people. Don't remember me as a politician. Please don't. I've never run for anything. I've never run for student council even. Not a politician. I'm a prosecutor. I want to be the head prosecutor because I think I have a lot to bring to the table. And so as a result of that, due to our process, I have to get a lot of votes to win. So I'm going to get those votes, but then I'm going to go back to the job of doing the people's work. And that is holding people accountable for the crimes they commit and helping victims out in what is often the worst day of their life. So I want to be remembered as someone who helped people in the worst day of their life. Sometimes I get letters from victims and victims' families, and that is the most rewarding part to me. That they send me a letter thanking me for helping me through this trying time in their life. So that is what I'm going to remember most from the job, and that's what I hope people remember most about me.
Thank you. Thanks again for coming onto Legal Angle and educating the public and talking to us about your work and your political run. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Anytime.
All right. And for those of you watching or listening to the show, we thank you for joining us. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you.